Hey everybody, Chapo here. It's me, Matt and Felix. In a little bit, I'm going to be talking to Kathryn Ledebur of the Andean Information Network about the coup that is going on in Bolivia right now. But let's just open things up with just a little teaser, a little taste. Don't know how much we have to say about this, but I got to bring it up, boys. Did you watch the Prince Andrew interview?
I mean,
I thought he was pretty convincing.
He silenced the haters. he basically did the high hope stance all over the haters.
I mean, but it does raise a question: can you blame a man for being too honorable?
He literally said, "My problem is that I'm too honorable."
He's too honorable.
Yeah, and he let down. He used some stupid. What was the thing he said? I let down the side.
I let down the side.
Yes, by being too honorable.
Yeah,
by being too honorable. Okay, so
by the way, that doesn't work. You can't be too honorable, because honorable is one of those things that has a positive value. It's always inherently good. So you should always be honorable. You cannot be too honorable. That cannot make you do something like hang out with a fucking pedophile.
But he was hanging out to tell him he's bad.
Okay. Two things here. One, who in the royal PR department thought this would be a good idea?
I'll tell you who. The guy who immediately resigned a day after the interview. Not kidding.
Or the real brain take on this is that they are throwing him to the wolves to make the rest of them seem like not connected to this.
Yeah.
Okay, but here's my favorite thing that he said in the whole interview. There are pictures of him with what's her name?
Virginia Guthrie.
Virginia, yeah. There are pictures of them together.
Yep.
So he can't really deny meeting her. So all he can say is, "I don't recall."
I don't recall.
Her.
Ooh, that's the.
And the person brought up the statement she had made, where like, I remember him sweatily, touching me, and all his. And he goes, he said, rather than just saying, "I don't remember that interaction," he said that I had a medical condition at the time that made it impossible for me to sweat, and that I don't have anymore. I'm sorry, like, that is
master class.
That is
absolute master class.
And he said, Matt, you would be interested. I mean, like, you're like, how could I catch that condition? And he said he got it when people shot at him during the fall.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Okay,
his war heroism gave him a temporary inability to sweat.
Yeah,
at the exact moment that he would have been getting all over a underage woman.
Yeah, no, it's really crazy. Like, I took some demons home with me from the Falklands. Like, one thing is, for about 10 years, I had completely clear skin. I never needed a cleanser or anything. It's like, we all carry baggage with us. It was
what I love about that
class.
is, like, you can like, the best you can do in that situation is just say, "I don't recall." This is the answer that every lawyer says is
Absolutely.
the best answer you can give if you're guilty of something. But it's the perfect pointless elaboration of a bad liar to try to come up with what I guess a more plausible excuse. Well, that couldn't have been me. I'm simply unable to sweat.
And I can't. Like, I've never heard of that. What is the explanation for that? Like his fear glands, like it was just like a CPU overloading and just cooking a motherboard.
Also, he would have died.
Yeah.
Well, no, he was sweating through his mouth like a dog.
Because, I mean, have you ever heard about the kid who covered his body in antiperspirant and died?
Well, it's like Goldfinger.
Yeah. You get suffocated. You overheat without having the sweat to regulate your temperature.
Sorry, just one of those things.
Is that signaling? Wait, maybe he's whistleblowing that he's actually a reptilian.
I mean,
reptiles don't sweat. Like,
no, Well, he had that. He, instead of sweating, he had to roll around in mud like a pig.
Sorry, just one other thing on this. God, I love the British press, because
the best.
There's just nothing that they won't say or do.
They are
and I was
absolute scum.
in the Times, Dominic Lawson. I stayed at Epstein's house, so don't hound Andrew. Cool, dude.
Who the fuck are you, buddy?
And he just says, Prince Andrew has been damned for his choice of friends, but he is blessed in his enemies, like Labour MP Chris Bryant. This guy Dominic Lawson, he's just like one of those columnists. There's a photo of him with his arms crossed looking at you.
He looks so complete nuts.
But he just says here, guilt by association is a conveniently elastic property for the press when it's engaged in a manhunt. In this case, the man is Prince Andrew, Duke of York, and he has been associating with a sex offender named Jeffrey Epstein.
Here's the advantage the royal family has in this in the wake of the worst interview in human history, or best, depending on your perspective. The British press has something the American press doesn't have, which is a human wave attack.
Yes.
The sheer volume of columnists makes it like it's an opinion writing Stalingrad. Like, if this guy gets struck down, there are 3,000 other guys who have sort of like, how do I describe it? Like sort of like Capellini textured hair, the same like dumb look on their face, the same pose where they're like, I'll be cutting through the crap of both sides. Like
But,
the
like-
same like leaning on their elbow type thing. And they're ready to write articles that are like, how do you even like what even is age?
No,
You don't know what it
It's
is.
like the Stalingrad. Like as each one of them drops the rifle with no bullets in it, by the time it gets to the end, they're going to be people writing columns like in the Telegraph or whatever, be like, I'm announced too. It's no problem. Like end judgment against it. Prince Andrew did nothing wrong.
There's gonna be like it's gonna be like there are two turnkeys go in, series of like cryo chambers open, like fucking like bank vault shit, like and then like just a Magneto type prison, like a sheer like glass prison, and Gary Glitter's in there. And they're like, Gary Glitter, we need you to write the greatest op-ed of all time. This for the Queen.
Gary Glitter, we need you to do rock and roll number 3 for Prince Andy.
That's the issue. That's what this election is about. Boris Johnson's like, I would absolutely the nuclear option.
Oh,
Gary
God.
Glitter writing a column in the Sun.
Yeah.
And Corbyn's like, I would absolutely not have Gary Glitter write a column in the Sun.
That's anti-Semitism, by the way.
yeah. No, it's anti-Semitic. Yeah.
Oh God.
Well, just a quick check-in on that. I mean, Chris, could you just edit in some of Andy's responses into this? His stammering, fucking sweaty.
But you were staying at the house of
Yes.
a convicted sex offender.
It was a convenient place to stay. I've gone through this in my mind so many times. At the end of the day, with the benefit of all the hindsight that one can have, it was definitely the wrong thing to do. But at the time, I felt it was the honourable and right thing to do.
You know, it's like that dumb
Aurora
bullshit.
Borealis on Little St. James Island this time of year. Yes, actually.
You know what it is though? I watched that interview and it's like, you know that idiotic thing where like who's that like it was a Democrat who was a prosecutor who was like, if you look the way his eyes go to the left, that's the total horseshit that everyone literally the movie The Negotiator with Samuel L. Jackson and Kevin Spacey invented that. But when I watch that video and you just hear him talk and you see his eyes and face dart all over the it's just there's no other word for it.
Yeah,
okay.
you can't do 4 Johnny Carson collar tugs in a row.
Yeah, Prince Andrew was wearing a cummerbund attached to a piece of string. It was just pulling it back and forth the entire
The
time.
flapping dicky.
Yeah.
Well, why did his bow tie keep spinning every time they brought up the girls he was reportedly with?
He had a top hat that opened like a can of beans every time he lied.
Oh, holy shit! Though it's just
boy.
they're not even trying.
No, they don't have to.
ridiculous.
That's
Give
the
a shit.
thing. Everything now is just a vulgar display of power, meant to make us feel totally impotent.
Well, on that note, I think let's get into a bit of more of our serious interview today with Kathryn Ledebur about the coup in Bolivia, and then we'll be back to discuss Mayor Pete. Got some good stuff coming. Okay, we are joined right now by Kathryn Ledebur, who is based in Cochabamba, Bolivia, and works for the Andean Information Network, which is a think tank that covers human rights, politics, and the drug war in Bolivia. And Kathryn, thanks for joining us. I do want to get to the background of the circumstances that led up to this coup. But I'd like to start by just talking about what is the situation in Bolivia and specifically Cochabamba, where you are right now, certainly under the shadow of not just this coup, but a regime government that has just passed a secret law that has basically gives the military a blank check or frees them from any prosecution or investigation of anything that they're doing right now.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's a very surreal situation because we have a government in power that has no right to be in power, that is passing these extreme measures that you referred to. We have security forces blocking the outside of the city limits so that rural people can't get in. So there's this image or this feeling of calm in downtown Cochabamba, and the blockades that we had in the streets for 3 weeks have been lifted. But outside the city limits, there is excessive use of force. There was a massacre on Friday night. There's an impediment of people from the Chapari coca growing area and from rural areas from coming into the city. So it's almost a de facto apartheid system where the urban residents in the wealthier neighborhoods feel quite at home and comfortable, but most of the country is excluded and many of them also repressed.
And specifically, you talked about a massacre on Friday. What happened and what were the circumstances that led to that?
Well, since last Monday, when Janine Áñez, second secretary or second vice president of the Senate, named herself president in front of an empty chamber, these blockades have gone up. Security forces don't let people into the city. So the people who had gathered in Sacaba, the neighboring smaller town outside Cochabamba, decided on Friday that they were going to try to peacefully march to Cochabamba. I've worked with this group of people for 20 years. It was a march in an effort to go through Cochabamba to La Paz, to advocate their interests, to reject the interim government. It was a march where they had taken their surgical masks off. There's been so much tear gassing that people have taken to wearing surgical masks to walk through the police line, and they were told they were going to be able to pass through. But at that time, the police and military shot tear gas into the crowd and then directly began shooting live ammunition. So there are 9 people dead of bullet wounds, 9 coca farmers, most of these bullet wounds to the head. Some of them shot from helicopters from above and from nearby bridges. There are over 100 people wounded. And, a clear show of excessive force and no repentance on the part of the government. And then this decree that basically guarantees impunity for the armed forces and obligates all civilian organizations and state organizations to participate fully with the armed forces and police. That is a dictatorship.
And you mentioned so now there are these mass protests, largely of people coming in from the rural parts of the country into the urban centers to protest this coup that has just happened. But leading up to the coup, there were obviously protests against Morales and his party. But how would you describe the difference in the coverage of these two different protests? One leading to this coup, and the other in a reaction to it.
Well, I think leading to the coup and during this very tense, disputed moment in elections, there was a great deal of coverage of the urban protests, of the blockades in the cities, people complaining that Evo Morales was a dictator. Let me tell you that if you're blockading the road with your toddlers and your Yorkies, you are not living in a dictatorship for a 3-week period. But that was heightened. There were also gangs of masked men on motorcycles with clubs that were going around the city, and upper middle class housewives and people at the blockades would cheer them, and they were beating people that they decided were Morales supporters. In other words, there was a racial profiling going on, that anybody who was especially brown or dressed in indigenous dress could be a target for these motorcycle gangs. And this was framed by the mainstream Bolivian press and also by the mainstream U.S. press in some cases. If you look at New York Times coverage or the Wall Street Journal, this very democratic uprising, and the low-income people, the Morales supporters' voices were, for the most part, not heard or not featured as prominently. It's important to note that after Morales' resignation Sunday night, it was a forced eradication. He had already agreed, forced resignation. He had already agreed to new elections and a new constitutional tribunal, which was the demand of the right. And then, they were sharing Mas public officials' addresses and digital locations in mass messages on social media so that protesters could go. And many Mas officials, including Morales himself and the house of his sister, were burned on Sunday. Ministers' houses, the head of the lower house of Congress, who was fourth in line for presidency, had his house burned down, his relatives kidnapped, this wave of violence. And when Morales resigned, this violence continued. And this interim government, with an interim government whose role is supposed to be call elections, has very quickly, first they named a new military high command. They're talking about publicly identifying all the seditious people, hunting down mosque ministers like animals, that they've identified seditious journalists, foreign journalists and national journalists, and that they would be prosecuted. There have been attacks on Argentine journalists. The Al Jazeera correspondent was tear gassed. And you saw almost immediately the great bulk of Bolivian national press flip dramatically to the right. And so although, rural people, indigenous people had received less coverage, now there was almost no coverage, and there hasn't been. And it's all from the point of view of this government that's engaging in violence and extremely undemocratic behavior.
I mean, you mentioned what this interim government is doing right now. Morales' party, I mean, leaving aside the issue of this presidential election, Mas is still a political party that controls something like, 2/3 of the actual legislature of Bolivia? So, independent of the presidency, now none of those elections are in dispute. But now this coup government is basically saying we are going to hunt down elected lawmakers who control the majority of Bolivia's, legislature. Right?
That is correct.
Oh, it sounds like a democracy to me. I don't know.
Morales' term, his constitutionally elected third term, ends January 22nd, 2020. And the Mas Congress is legal and has a 2/3 majority in each house until that date. But please understand that Áñez and a handful of other opposition members appointed her to head of the Senate and president in an 8-minute period in front of an empty chamber. And the next day, when Mas officials attempted to get in the Congress building, the police beat them and tear gassed them. They eventually got in at midnight the next day and have been inside the building, a portion of them rotating ever since. It's like a Star Trek parallel universe. I don't know if you've seen Mirror, Mirror. Maybe I'm telling you.
Oh, you were talking to the exact right person, Kathryn. I have seen every episode of Star Trek, so the reference is not lost.
Okay, well, I used to teach the cultural relevance of Star Trek, so we have to have many important discussions about this. And I'll show you my action figures after we're done.
We can talk Deep Space Nine on another episode. But no, you bring up this woman who is now the self-declared president of Bolivia, Janine Áñez, and the party she represents got 4% of the vote, and now this person is the one who has just been declared herself president. Could you talk about, first of all, who she is, but also what the party she belongs to? Who are they? What do they represent? And what are their policies or ideology?
Well, I mean, this is a party where its official leader is the Bolivian Burger King, Samuel Doria Medina. He used to also be the Bolivian cement king, but he's moved on. But it's not a significant party. I think, what we really need to look at is the way that the Bolivian opposition, which was very fractured and coming up into the elections, they couldn't come up with a coalition to come in with the election, which would have improved their electoral possibilities, although I still think it wouldn't have been a convincing alliance, is that you have Carlos Mesa, the former president who was considered an intellectual centrist historian, although he was pushed out of power after a year and a half because he didn't comply with the results of a popular referendum on hydrocarbons. But these faces, these centrist faces, really have moved into this wave that's been driven by this man, Luis Fernando Camacho, far right-wing representative of the pro-Santa Cruz Civic Committee. And, he got his start in the Santa Cruz Youth League. This is an organization that in all their official presentations and video use a Nazi salute. Camacho, this is not confusing. This is not subtle. And this is who is driving the train now. It's this charismatic, religious laying of hands on Carlos Mesa and other political figures that God had ordained them to be president. It's been a very racist dialogue up until a little bit of whitewashing in the last couple of weeks. And a man that was elected by a 242-member organization. And so it's really important to note that once you get in bed with a fascist organization, you just don't break up.
Yeah, no, it seems like the opposition to Morales of urban liberals or the centrists or whatever were happy to cheer along any military kicking him out of office, and then surprise surprise, guess what, the people who you've actually put in power are insane fascists.
Well, those are the people who are driving the train. Agnes and her ministers are in the same position. She is from Lowland Department of Beni. They've recovered her tweets. She erased them all, but they've all been verified on the Wayback Machine, except one where she ridicules indigenous people. She talks about religious ceremonies and indigenous customs as satanic rituals. She makes fun of indigenous people for wearing shoes. She has a whole series of enormously offensive comments and racist comments. It's important to note that with the 2009 Constitution, Bolivia has, as a state, has no official religious affiliation and backs freedom of religion. But when she swore herself in, she was carrying a Bible the size of a mattress and waving it around. I mean, now I know why her triceps aren't sagging, but it's this terrifying image. It
was her bringing this gigantic Bible into the presidential palace and placing it over the flag and saying that we are reclaiming our government in the name of Jesus Christ against these supposedly demonic indigenous cultural or religious practices.
Yeah, I guess it was like heathens. It was fascinating because they interviewed in the press when the press was still covering things, an indigenous woman, and she said, "How is this different from the Spanish coming to bash us on the head with the Bible and sticking us with the sword? Here we are back in the same situation again." And I think that that's not lost on Bolivia's indigenous population. And remember that part of this rebellion and the police rebellion was ripping off and burning the Huipala, which is the indigenous flag, which was under Morales one of Bolivia's official flags. So there's this patent rejection. And when we went and documented the massacre and we talked to the witnesses, over and over again, people said they're killing us like dogs. They don't think we're human. We can't be in part of a government where to them we don't exist or have any rights. And that is a compelling feeling. Sorry,
could you talk just a little bit more about the issue of the indigenous flag, but also the indigenous population of Bolivia? It's 70% of that country is indigenous, and found in MAS, a party that represented them, and of course now are being brutally oppressed by a regime that is very much not indigenous.
Yes, well, the figures vary about how you identify someone as indigenous or whether they self-identify, but it's well over half of the population. And it's important to know that during Moss's long tenure, and especially in response to the fourth run, there were people, and also indigenous people, who had decided that Morales shouldn't run again, that it was time for a change, that did not fully support him, and that may have voted for the second place candidate, Mesa. But it's important to note that what started as apparently a centrist alternative, although no opposition party complied with the gender parity laws where half the candidates needed to be women, none of these parties made any attempt to appeal to indigenous candidates, rural candidates, working class candidates. And those people who were on the line or may have voted against Morales are really clearly seeing this racial linguistic divide, the police hitting people for speaking in Quechua if they don't know one of the indigenous languages and an official language of Bolivia. All women wearing polleras, which are traditional indigenous skirts from some of the cultures, getting targeted and beaten. Those people who were on the line, the people I've talked to, they can see it pretty clearly now where this is going. But the problem is, in an interim government that doesn't behave like an interim government, doesn't respect the Constitution, doesn't respect basic human rights or due process, where do you go from there? And with the vociferous support and applause of the Trump administration.
Could you talk about, in terms of the circumstances leading up to the election, the term limits issue, but very specifically the role of the Organization of American States, the OAS, in sort of, I guess, declaring Morales' victory or this election fraudulent? Who are the OAS, and what led them to make that that judgment call, which I've seen cited in every major Western news account of why this coup has happened?
I thought they canceled that show.
We definitely should cancel their president. The OAS, at Morales' request, carried out an audit. It was an audit that was supposed to take approximately 10 days. And the idea on the part of the Morales administration, and with the support of the UN, the European Union, and other nations, was to transparently go through all of the election results and verify them. And Morales agreed that it would be binding. As violence spiraled, and in response to the police rebellion, where the police basically walked out of the barracks and sided with the anti-Morales protesters, there were retaliatory attacks, and Morales supporters burning down police stations. And the OAS finally on Sunday morning, not last Sunday, but the Sunday before, announced hastily and far in advance preliminary results of the audit, where they suggested that there had been improprieties and there were problems with the computer system. It was an initial report in in Spanish. I don't think there's going to even be a final report, but Morales, faced with the violence and his promise that it was binding, called for new elections 1 hour afterwards and called for a multi-party and all political actors to together elect an electoral tribunal. This didn't stop the violence. And the following week, Almagro said, there was a coup in Bolivia. And the coup was on election day when Evo Morales committed fraud, which is such a bizarre statement. I mean, we're flipping back and forth from one end to the other. And, not at all productive, not a focus in engaging in dialogue or moving forward. Many of the OAS member states, and it's important to note, although the opposition rejected the audit, that, the member states in the Organization of American States are no way all Morales backers. You have people like Duque in Colombia. You have people like the Macri administration in Argentina, although they're on the way out, the Moreno administration in Ecuador, that are all, basically anti-Morales. But this erratic set of positions on the part of the Organization of American States definitely exacerbated the crisis. And here we are with no clear outcome, an interim government that is repressive and doesn't obey the rules, and most union leaders and journalists and human rights defenders with severe death threats and no real clue if they're going to make it through this.
So you've been covering, like I said, issues like, human rights and politics in Bolivia for, 30 years now. Like, how do you see what's just happened in Bolivia as part of a broader kind of, I don't know, counterattack on, any even vaguely left-wing or populist government in Latin America? Certainly, what has been tried to have been done in Venezuela, but also like the rise of, again, fascist right-wing figures like Bolsonaro in Brazil, who's also a big fan of this latest coup.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a lot of cheerleaders. It's fascinating because I almost get the perception that these opposition leaders wanted to Guaido it. They were really very interested in actually taking power. Beyond their hatred of Morales and their shift to the right, there's no real concrete plan or vision or strategy to actually govern. So we see here in Bolivia a shift to the far right, but I think that if this group does stay in power, or if during elections a right-wing group comes in, either through non-transparent elections or by any means, you're going to see an Ecuador and a Chile within the next year. In other words, a kind of popular protest and uprising against governments that shrink benefits for the population, with increasing costs, with increasing inflation, with perhaps a reduction in the fuel subsidies in Bolivia, which are significant, definitely a reduction in the state sector, which grew considerably under Morales. So I think we're seeing a pendulum here that has swung to the right, but a pendulum never stays there. And I think that if this is the situation of this right-wing government, it's not going to last.
Final question. I just want to get your thoughts on something I read over the weekend from Kenneth Roth of Human Rights Watch, who tweeted and linked to a New York Times article about the what's going on there. Said, quote, "Important that Bolivia's change of government not become an excuse for violence, discrimination, and neglect towards its indigenous communities." What do you think about Kenneth Roth saying that now after the fact?
Well, I would say that after the fact is better than nothing, but not at the right time. And I feel like the same way about the New York Times' coverage of this conflict. They printed false information that there was a state of emergency issued. They presented false information that the military were turning on Morales 2 weeks before things actually came to a head. And so, now there's a mild mea culpa on the part of these people trying to shift their tone, but we're in an untenable, undemocratic situation. And, some clarity and balance would have been helpful. Even today, a person who's been more balanced, the head of the House Foreign Relations Committee of the United States, tweeted at Áñez and the security forces that a transition government should only call new elections and that they had to stop engaging in state violence. There's some cognitive dissonance on people who really supported this push to get Morales out no matter what. There's a lot of denial, and there's a lot of backing up things that are unjustifiable and unforgivable. And so that's where we are.
Well, Kathryn, I want to leave it there. I want to thank you so much for joining us. Kathryn Ledebur of the Andean Information Network. Please check out their work. And also, Kathryn, please stay safe as you continue to cover this ongoing coup in Bolivia.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks again.
That's like, I can't stop thinking about committing suicide by cop while that song plays and doing the Mayor Pete dance.
Save it.
No, it's on. It's on.
That is my number one invasive thought is like doing the Mayor Pete dance while High Hope is just
the fight song of 2020.
It's better than Fight Song.
Oh, it's way better.
It's better than Fight Song because it's the shittiest song I've ever heard in my life. And it's just blasting from your car speakers and you're surrounded by like tacked up cops. It's like the first scene from Ghost in the Shell. And like they're just pointing like M4A1 stop mods at you. Like a guy has a fucking grenade launcher. And they're like, "Sir, stop moving. Stop moving." Just ha ha ho hopes for a minute. You're doing like the little forearm roll thing.
The rolls and the clapping.
Yeah, and they just perforate you. I've been thinking about doing the shuffling part of the dance into a grouping of red dots and just being instantly vaporized by 12 snipers with 50 caliber Barrett 50 cals.
Felix blasting that song out of the Hindenburg as you fly it into a forest fire.
Oh, humanity! Taking your Tesla and just fucking flooring at full speed with a quarter-mile start into like a semi carrying gasoline. Hopes for a minute.
Riding the nuclear bomb down like Slim Pickens. They're going.
There have been so many videos of people doing that dance. It is terrifying.
It's great. It makes me want to vote for him.
Okay.
It's insane. It's insane behavior. It sent me in a downward mental spiral for sure. So it's working.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I got plenty to talk about. There's so much to talk about Mayor Pete this week, and I want to get into that. But before we do, I think it would behoove us to just bring up Elizabeth Warren's big news this week, which is that she is
psych. That's the big news.
Yeah, psych.
Later, bitch. That's her saying that to you before any accusations of misogyny. That is not me saying that to her.
So the whole thing is like, I just like, we don't even need to talk about it that much other than to say we were right.
We were right. We called it.
We were right. We called it. Like as short ago as like a couple weeks. The line out of, the precincts, the people. I don't have to run it down. But the line was, I think it's sort of weird the way the left is just parsing every single sentence Elizabeth Warren has ever said or not said about Medicare for all. It's just a bit weird and frankly in bad faith. Guess what? We were right.
Yep.
That parsing was actually very necessary and led us to the correct conclusion, which is that she does not actually really want or care about Medicare for all.
Nope.
And you can tell that by this convolute, this switcheroo she's doing now where she's saying, public option first. I'm going to split it into two bills. Public option first, and then and then in the third year after my approval rating is like 30%.
Yeah.
We're
And
gonna
you've lost both houses of Congress.
After another election cycle, we'll do the actual Medicare for all part of it. And it's just, I'm sorry, this is just the same exact dodge that Pete and Biden and Kamala all do. It's
Medicare for all who want it.
It's just a shorter time frame.
Yes.
But it's still the same bullshit.
It's dangling the eventual Medicare for all bill as a carrot out on a string.
Yes.
It's always around the corner, but it'll never get there. You'll never get there from here. You build this, and it's Obamacare too. Remember when Obamacare was going to be the bridge to universal health care?
Yep.
It's always, we're going to set it up, and then, we're going to add this, and it's just going to be a natural progression. Meanwhile, it's wildly unpopular when it's passed. It's alienating. It's hard to understand. A lot of people don't get the benefits from it. They can't afford it. They get resentful for it. They're disillusioned by it. Then there's a huge backlash, and the whole effort is put back another decade, and then the Republican administration destroys everything that you built then when you inevitably lose.
It is really funny to watch the pundit algorithm attempt to rewrite itself after for months saying Bernie and Sanders are exactly the same on Medicare for all. It's ridiculous to imply that she's sort of half-hearted or slightly evasive about this issue, despite the clear fact that she is.
Yep.
And now that this happens, the new line is that it's just about priorities. And she's prioritizing an anti-corruption bill or the wealth tax first, which is fine. But then they say, there's no chance that the Medicare for all is going to pass this. How are you going to get Joe Manchin or Kristen Sinema to vote for it? Well, how are you going to get them to vote for Elizabeth Warren's
Exactly.
bill? It's this. They both stand the exact same.
They will vote for it if it ends up being an Obamacare style giveaway that they gut and rewrite with the insurance companies.
Exactly.
If it is a real public option that is threatening the way they say it is, they will either undermine it over time or they will not let it pass. This is an existential fight because the private health insurance exists or it doesn't. And if it exists, it will dictate the market and it will exploit people and it will cause death because it will ration care by ability to pay. That is inevitable if you have health insurance as an industry. It has to go and it will fight to the end. And there's no way you can trick it. They're not even going to know we're going to do it. We're going to sleep it behind it. What, in the third year after, as you say, you've had your approval rating just ground down by time and failure? And after a midterm, you'll probably lose if all historical trends are obeyed?
I just think like there's so many people, especially of like the Warren supporter variety, who seem to think that like they're being incredibly like clever or savvy
by
so
savvy.
Preemptively negotiating against their own imagination or political beliefs. Because it's like, look, this is a campaign. Your campaign plan, it's all theoretical, right? You're just saying like, this is my wish list. This is what I want to
and you're
do.
doing exactly what the Obamas did, which is you start negotiations by destroying your leverage.
Yes.
You start negotiations by already conceding before you've even started the negotiation.
And the fact that it's all theoretical.
It's like when Obama said that they were gonna like rule out anything that got rid of insurance when they started.
I mean, and like Elizabeth Warren is just like a slightly better version of that. But again, it's the same algorithm, and we already know the results that produces, right? But it's like, look, it's all theoretical. Your campaign platform is just a wish list.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anyone who like supports Bernie Sanders who has any real illusions about the likelihood of getting like Medicare, a real Medicare for all or Green New Deal through this shitty fucking government.
Yep.
But if we all understand that to be the case, isn't that all the more important to just vote for the person who actually stands up and believes in the things that you do?
See, that's the thing. And that is, I think, the fundamental issue here. You can throw all the wonky shit and all the stuff about, payment mechanisms and all that and competition and whatever, all of the details about how you actually pay for and switch to Medicare for all. What is Medicare for all? Is it a thing that is a realistic short-term political goal? No. It's a weapon. It's a weapon to fight the current political structure we have in this country, which will never allow in any context this to happen. Even if you got it passed, guess what? There's the Republican judiciary waiting to invalidate it and say it's unconstitutional, which they 1,000% will. So that means that you can't have it in this system. So that means you have to destroy the system. You have to challenge it and beat it. You have to change the terms of the debate by reorienting the political structure, by massively increasing the number of people who vote, by re-energizing the labor unions, like by making a labor movement that can create points of leverage and through work stoppages, where you literally can challenge the government and challenge capital on their own terms. And the way you start with that is with a fucking issue that you can say we want, and people want it because they know that it will help their lives. And we want it, but why it isn't happening is because of this system. And you use it to smash it down. You don't already start by negotiating away from it and muddying the waters about what it really means and turning it into this arid, bureaucratic backroom deal that eventually leads to something no one's going to give a shit
and again,
about.
Even if you don't understand how it really works and what is actually more realistic, making Medicare for all the centerpiece of a winning Democratic presidential campaign, and then immediately going all in, full court press, first fucking days in office, or splitting it into two bills and having two separate, gigantic, drawn-out fights that you'll be leached of support and attack nonstop. And it's like, even with the better scenario, it's still unlikely. But Matt is exactly right. Medicare for all, and not the legislation, one that actually as extant exists, the bill's written. But this is the difference of the Warren and the plans thing. More important than that, it's a movement. And that movement is a weapon to attack the consensus that surrounds the role of private insurance in our lives.
That's the number. You have to look at Medicare as an instrument for this, not as an end to itself. Because guess what? We're not getting anything through this. And that's what's so funny about these people who claim that they're so fucking savvy and that they're so fucking evidence-based and reasonable, unlike all these pie-in-the-sky dreamers and demagogues like Bernie. They're insanely naive because they still assume that this system can be negotiated with. They think that a Mitch McConnell Senate and a trumped-up judicial branch is going to let anything through. It won't. They have the points of leverage in this system. It has to be challenged and overthrown.
Okay, like I said, we've already said too much about this. We don't need to, because we've been saying it for months and months now. We're right.
Yeah.
Everyone who doubted us looks foolish, but they won't admit it.
Yep. But I just want to say the same thing that leads people to think that Warren's approach is more savvy or whatever. It's that same desire to think that you're smart. It's that same desire to feel to yourself and to project to other people that you're a smart person and that you're not some demagogue, or some ideologue or somebody who just like is a knee-jerk voter. You're canny and smarter than that. And that's the same thing that make people support the coup in Peru, or I'm sorry, the coup in Bolivia, because they're like, well, we don't know. We have to be. It's too simplistic to say that this is just a coup or that the U.S. is involved, right? Because why would we do that? And then Morales did X, Y, and Z. This is a questionable election, and there's reason to want to challenge it. And then what happens as soon as it happens? As soon as the coup happens,
an insane fascist bringing a Bible and
waving it around. They're cutting off the patches, and now they said we have to have Morales leave because of the threat of violence. The police who said we will not fire on these protesters are now just killing people in the streets. Everything, and anybody who approached the coup with this canny, streetwise, nuanced approach. Yeah. You had less of a grasp on the situation than some dipshit kid marinating in Stalin memes who calls their parents CIA agents because they wouldn't buy him a moistened Nagant for his birthday. That kid has a better grasp of that situation than you did because he could see at least the reality of capitalism and the Western imperialism, which are things you can't accept because those are too simplistic of answers. But I'm sorry, some questions have simple answers, and if you understand those simple answers, you get a hell of a lot closer to the truth. So what these people end up being is fucking suckers and chumps. They end up being complete fucking boobs who get scammed so easily by people like Warren and by the fucking State Department propaganda.
All I will say, though, there's still room on board the Bernie train. Come on over. The water's nice. The water's great.
Well, I'll just say this on the show is that I have a 1 week amnesty period. At the end of this week, anyone who has been Warren curious up until now, they have till the end of the week to come forward, and I will take them off of my pay no mind list. And this is a one-time only offer. At the end of the week, it's all done. So just let you know that.
Moving on from Warren, we're going to spend the rest of the show talking about Mayor Pete because as vexing as Warren is to me, holy shit, I hate this motherfucker, Pete Buttigieg, so much. And here's the thing. I didn't think it was possible, but Mayor Pete is more evil than Joe Biden, and I'll tell you exactly why. Joe Biden has a record that's unparalleled in being one of the most damaging to our society in the history of American politics. We can take that as read. Mayor Pete has, like we said, been the mayor of a city in Indiana. That's all he's done so far.
He got 8,000. He won by 8,000. He got 8,000 votes last time.
More people voted in my poll. What is the best car to crash into a wall, dying instantly? By about 1,000, actually.
So, here's the thing. Despite the fact that Mayor Pete's record of evil is still relatively contained, Mayor Pete is more evil than Joe Biden because he is saying, I am auditioning to be and represent all of the same things Joe Biden has done and throughout his career, but I'm auditioning to be that guy in 2019.
Yeah.
And continue that for another 30 fucking years.
Yeah.
So like that is the fucking that is what is so evil about him.
Also, Joe Biden, like the charming thing about Joe Biden to me is that he has been on the wrong side of pretty much every decision in the Democratic Party.
Every single one.
Like pretty much like almost
years.
his entire adult life.
As long as I've been alive,
yet,
basically.
He personally, forgoing his sons, he personally has just not profited from it at all. Like his idea of like getting one over is he like makes a bill where it's like, all right, it's illegal for a prosecutor to ever even talk to an investment banker. Like it's if you go bankrupt, your bank can kill you, can enslave your kids. And he's like, all right, well, we got an AIG windbreaker out of this. It's getting pretty cold out. Joe, you just saved yourself upwards of $90. Like he's horribly in debt for most of his life. He always toots his horn about being the poorest senator, but it's like, yeah, that means he just like did this for the love of the game because he likes shaking people's hands.
He just likes going to meetings.
Yeah, but Pete, Pete's a McKinsey bloodsucker. He's already personally profited off the rot.
Pete is the baby that Vigo the Carpathian tries to put his spirit into at the end.
And
of
it's like slightly turning into his face at the end.
Yeah, Vigo is Joe Biden, and the baby is Pete Buttigieg.
No, imagine being in 2019, being like, yeah, I'm going to be the next Joe Biden and support all the policies that he has stood for over his career in 2019.
But he just thinks that it's a way to power. That's all he cares about. He has no see, and that's the other thing that makes him worse than Biden. I do believe that Biden has some sort of jumbled up ideology in his head that he thinks like equals like American greatness. Like he closes his eyes and he imagines like a kid eating a hot dog in a Cub Scout uniform, and like he imagines that he's making America like that.
You know, it's like this.
Mayor Pete has nothing. Like when you say, "What do you believe?" It's just a blank screen, just power for its own sake.
Yeah, Mayor Pete. Like if you sat Joe Biden down in a room and you're like, you asked him to like explain his platform, you would actually get an answer. It would be indecipherable. It would, it'd just be like, there's a little league game and the poor kids, they're hanging out with the rich kids, but they're all having a good time. And the thing was, back then, okay, Latino guys didn't ride bicycles. And we get them riding bikes. And that's really you remember back then we didn't know what the hell lipstick was. We thought women's lips were just getting redder and redder and redder, and we plumb didn't know what the hell to do about it. And that's really what it's all about, is coming together and go, hey, what the hell are you putting on there? But like it would just be insane. It would be word salad. It would be something in there about like
it would be the montage from Parallax View,
right? But Mayor Pete, like he would try to do the Mayor Pete dance. He doesn't have an answer. He does not have an answer at all.
So there are two big stories about Pete Buttigieg that I want to spend the rest of the shift talking about. The first comes courtesy of Ryan Grimm in The Intercept, and I would also like to shout out and thank Ryan Grimm on the show for actually putting us in touch with Kathryn for that interview about Bolivia. That was great.
Good looking out, Ryan.
Good looking out, Ryan Grimm. This is in The Intercept. Pete Buttigieg touted three major supporters of his Douglas plan for Black America. They were alarmed when they saw it. And like this story is basically the Pete Buttigieg campaign is a brochure for a small liberal arts college in the Northeast that has just photoshopped just a bunch of smiling college kids, and then just like a Photoshop like Samuel L. Jackson stock photo into the brochure, touting their diverse community and support. But you can still see the watermark like on the face. Okay, so I'm just gonna start reading here. In July, he released his campaign's chief piece of policy outreach to Black voters called the Douglas Plan, a comprehensive investment in the empowerment of Black America. The plan covers everything from criminal justice reform to public health care, education, and beyond. It proposes using federal contracting rules to increase the amount of contracts going to minority and women-owned firms to 25%, and offers student loan deferment and forgiveness to Pell Grant recipients who go on to start businesses that employ at least 3 people.
That's this. I cannot believe it. That's the second time I'm seeing this exact policy. Kamala had this exact thing.
Yeah.
And, like the response was just people making fun of it, and now she's just got to pretend like she never put it out there. And it's like, that sounds great.
And by the way, that policy, that's just a gentrifying supercharger.
Yeah.
Because the people who are going to be in a position to take out the money or have access to the money to start a small business that soon after college in urban areas are going to be white. Overwhelmingly. Like it's just, it doesn't even do what it's supposed to do, and it's amazing. It's supposed, like the fucking benefit of this stuff is that it's supposed to micro target the exact people that need to be helped, and not be all universal programs. Oh, rich people get some of that. It doesn't help the people who need it. It's too profligate. This is supposed to help exactly who needs it, and it doesn't even do that.
This is a bill. It's like he went into Bushwick and was like, there aren't enough bars called honey plus salt. we need it to just be entirely that.
So when pressed on the lack of Black support, Buttigieg and his campaign have made repeated references to the Douglas Plan, named for abolitionist Frederick Douglass. To build support for the plan, Buttigieg and his staff lobbied prominent Black South Carolinians to endorse it in order to strengthen the cause of racial justice. The Washington Post reported on Monday that Buttigieg persuaded hundreds of prominent black South Carolinians to sign on to the plan, even if they are not supporting Buttigieg himself. Along with the release of the plan, his campaign directed consultants to convene focus groups with undecided black voters in South Carolina. The resulting research memo, finalized in late July, concluded that Buttigieg's sexuality was a barrier to winning support among black voters. The memo was leaked to the press this fall. Okay, let's read through the lines there. Buttigieg's campaign is seeing the polling that he has less than 1% African-American support overall, but especially in South Carolina, which, you gotta show out there. It's like the third Democratic primary. And I saw a poll this week that said that Buttigieg was leading in Iowa and had like a 14-point bounce, which I'm sorry, I don't believe.
It's an outlier. And honestly, even if he is leading in polls right now, at the same time in 2011 was Herman Cain. And I just really feel like Buttigieg is Herman Cain with the roller backpack. He's a flash in the pan.
But no, I want to be clear about this thing about convening a focus group about his African-American support and then leaking it to the press. His campaign convened a focus group to find an answer for why he has such tepid support among African-Americans. And of course, it's a focus group, so you design it to give you the answer you want and leak to the press, which is, surprise, surprise, black people are just too homophobic to support Mayor Pete.
Which is interesting because he must just be using that as like an excuse for his current white supporters.
Yeah.
So that they don't feel weird about it. It's like, he would have more, but they're just a little.
There's a problem in that community, Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, they would support him so they could feel better about their support for Mayor Pete.
And again, fun game to play here about any of this article. Imagine if the Bernie campaign did any of this.
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
I mean, like it is not since Prop 8, since people tried to like blame Prop 8 on homophobic black voters.
Yeah.
It's a throwback. Mayor Pete, like for all his forward positioning and like sort of tilt towards a weird type of LinkedIn futurism, is a throwback. Like more than Biden is. Well, Biden is sort of like the main message of his campaign is like, do you want it to feel like 2009 again?
Yeah.
Mayor Pete is living there.
Yeah.
Like that. It's that type of exact type of liberalism. The
come back to 2009. Remember, we all loved the oatmeal.
Yeah. Mayor Pete should just he should have rage comics on his like in place of his policy section, which he didn't have for like 6 months on his website. I mean, if Bernie, imagine if Bernie said that black people didn't vote for him because they're homophobic. We'd first point out that Bernie isn't gay and he's lying. So like, there's a huge thing right there.
So going on now. 3 days later, the Buttigieg campaign began promoting a list of 400 South Carolinian supporters of his Douglas plan in emails to reporters and posts on social media. The supporters were rolled out in a press release open letter published in the HBCU Times, which focuses on positive news related to historically black colleges and universities. Listed at the top of the press release were three prominent supporters: Columbia City Councilwoman Tamika Devine, Baptist pastor and state representative Ivory Thigpen, and Johnny Cordero, chair of the state party's Black Caucus. There is one presidential candidate who has proven to have intentional policies designed to make a difference in the black experience, and that's Pete Buttigieg, read the open letter released along with the plan.
That really sounds like an endorsement.
The blowback came immediately. Devine, who had not endorsed a candidate yet in the presidential election, told The Intercept that she did not intend her support for the plan to be read as an endorsement for Buttigieg's candidacy and believes the campaign was intentionally vague about the way it was presented. Asked if she knew if any of the black supporters of the plan were also supporters of Buttigieg, she said she wasn't sure. The only ones I really know were me and Representative Thigpen, she said. I don't know many actually now to think about it other than the folks working on Mayor Pete's campaign. Thigpen, meanwhile, has endorsed Senator Bernie Sanders for president and was startled when he learned that the campaign had not only attached his name to the plan, but also listed him as one of the top three supporters atop the letter. Here is the really amazing part. The way they did this is that they sent people an email about this and said, not responding to this email will be used as evidence of your support and endorsement of Pete Buttigieg.
See, brilliant. That's why I am still charged every month for my browser subscription. the same technique.
After the publication, the Buttigieg campaign said it had sent the plan to a list of supporters and asked them to opt out if they did not want their name included on the list. The email also specifically said that the list was meant to represent over 400 black South Carolinians. And then, of course, it came out that like maybe half of them were just white people.
Yeah.
The Buttigieg campaign said that they have never claimed that the list was exclusively prominent black South Carolinians and that it's important to have a multiracial coalition to support the end goal of racial justice. Okay, and then also, as part of this this plan, the Buttigieg campaign uses stock footage of a Kenyan woman to represent their support among.
That's literally the
black
college
South-
pamphlet thing.
Yes. Okay.
Or that's like all those guys who are on Twitter was Blacks for Trump, where they just grab it off of Shutterstock. Amazing.
Yeah, no, what I love so much about they're like, please respond to opt out of this endorsement. By reading this email, you have agreed to endorse Pete Buttigieg and his Frederick Douglass plan.
Amazing.
Imagine if Bernie Sanders
Just
did
think
that.
about it, folks.
Just imagine if he
Just
did
think
that.
about it for a minute.
Yeah.
And imagine all of the people who love and support Pete Buttigieg and attack Sanders all the time. What has been their response to this?
I'm not talking about it, to my
But
understanding.
here's my favorite thing about this: the whole thing about like how creating a focus group to give you an answer that you can leak to the press that like basically slanders the black community as being homophobic for not supporting you, Pete Buttigieg, and your plan to uplift black people in America, and then being like, by looking at this email, you have agreed to respond to the email within an hour if you That to me, this is all McKinsey mindset. This is what he learned at McKinsey. And the other big article out about this week about Pete Buttigieg is even more interesting to me because I just thought, like, okay, we saw those pictures of him in Afghanistan, like holding a rifle and like, looking down the barrel at it, holding it the wrong way or just looking like a complete fucking prat.
He was not a gun guy. As
he was
Virgil
an
says.
office guy in Afghanistan. Then he
Yes.
was like,
Well, like it turns out, like the bulk of what he did was economic development in war zones.
Yeah,
which,
yeah.
What does that mean?
Okay, but like, and then he joined McKinsey, and I remember learning about that, and I was like, holy shit! Like, just joining up with one of the most evil outfits imaginable. And when that first started happening, people started saying that. The response was, "Oh, come on! Like, the only account he worked on was like a regional grocery chain." Okay, well, it turns out that's the reason we know about that is because everything else he did for McKinsey is covered by an NDA, and what he did for them was blood-curdling shit about, yes, as Felix said, promoting security and economic development in war zones. If you can read that sentence and not just see CIA on it, I don't know what the fuck.
He went into Afghanistan and Iraq and looked for Pell Grant recipients.
So this is a piece at BuzzFeed by Henry J. Gomez. Pete Buttigieg's work at McKinsey is a secret. Buttigieg's campaign says it reached out to the company about the possibility of being released from a confidentiality agreement, but the mayor has so far stayed quiet. For nearly 3 years, he worked at McKinsey & Company, an elite management consulting firm with offices around the world. It was work that took him, he has said, to Iraq and Afghanistan. And for years after that, in his early campaigns for public office, Buttigieg held up his stint in McKinsey as a selling point and proof that he was a business-friendly Democrat, while only vaguely describing what he did and never revealing his clients. Asked by BuzzFeed News this week if Buttigieg would be willing to provide more information about his role at the firm, spokesman Chris Meager confirmed that the campaign on at least 2 occasions has asked McKinsey about ways around the non-disclosure pact. Buttigieg's work is largely covered by a non-disclosure agreement, Meager said Friday. McKinsey has become known for working with authoritarian regimes and taking on other ethically complicated projects. A New York Times report last year focused on its work for governments or state-owned companies in China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. A recent lawsuit against the pharmaceutical company that makes OxyContin raised questions about the firm's role in perpetuating the opioid crisis. That is a hell of a fucking resume
Look,
right there.
it's ethically complicated, okay? I went on Facebook and I clicked ethically complicated.
Mayor Pete is the anti-hero candidate. He's the FX protagonist candidate.
Yes, he is.
He's Jax.
Yeah.
He's like, listen, we got to get out of the deal with the Saudis so we can make the move out of opioids. We got to do a deal with the Saudis so we can get out of.
Mayor Pete's policies are exactly as convoluted and non-functional as the Sun's. Like, all right, so we go into the neighborhood and we find every Pell Grant recipient, and they will lease the guns to us, and then we'll sell them to other Pell Grant recipients in another neighborhood, and then we get the Chinese to sell us guns from the IRA, and then they'll find people who received over 6 figures of student loans, and they can get an earned income tax credit to buy the guns back from us. What can you say? But the crow flies straight for a minute.
Okay, going on. Buttigieg has in the past described his time at McKinsey, which followed a Harvard education and a Rhodes Scholarship at the University of Oxford, as a sort of finishing school. In Shortest Way Home, the political memoir he published earlier this year, he wrote that the job was a chance to learn what wasn't on the page and get an education in the real world. If there is, you need to get some street smarts. Yeah.
Pete graduated from the School of Hard Knocks.
So the job also allowed Buttigieg to present himself to Republicans as a businessman and different kind of Democrat when he ran for Indiana state treasurer in 2010.
Isn't that just the exact same kind of Democrat that they've always had in Indiana since like fucking Birch Bayh retired?
Yeah.
It's just like that's what's new about that?
Check this out. Buttigieg took his McKinsey pitch to a 2010 South Bend forum sponsored by groups aligned with the nascent Tea Party, an audience partial to the Republican incumbent. Quote, I did math for a living around economics. The economics of energy and the economics of stabilizing very tough places around the world in order to make sure there's less violence there, Buttigieg told the crowd that night.
Well, when you have 50 military-age males and then you subtract 24 military-age males, you have 50% fewer.
It's kind of interesting that all of the places where all of the energy is, all of the violence is there too.
Weird.
Why does that happen? Buttigieg told the crowd that night, but I got to thinking, if I'm any good at stabilizing economies, pacifying populations, and stabilizing their economies.
If I'm good at moving weight with Freeway Rick Ross.
Maybe I ought to help try to stabilize the economy right here in Indiana.
Wow.
To use the same, techniques learned at McKinsey, his education in the real world, again, stabilizing, pacifying restive populations in, imperial war zones.
We need a Phoenix Project for America's entrepreneurs.
So he goes, I got my street smarts working in war zones on economic stabilization, Buttigieg told the South Bend Tribune in October 2007. And I think that experience stands up next to anybody's. Yeah, sure.
Okay, man.
And by anybody's, he means all of the characters in James Ellroy's Underworld USA trilogy.
Yes. I mean, there's two.
If you want to put my work up next to Tiger Camp, and all of the Tiger associated cadres, then let's do it.
I think that there's two. What his career there in Iraq was one of two things. Either he was a fucking spook and he is an actual CIA agent running for president, which is honestly kind of amazing. Just the idea that they're fuck it. All these billionaires have decided they're going to cut out the middleman. Now the CIA has also decided they're going to cut out the middleman. It's why do we have to fuck around with these other guys? We'll just have one of our own do it. So he was either doing deep fucking CIA shit, fucking Gladio 2 or
giving money to ISIS.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Either that or best case scenario is he's charging the Coalition Provisional Authority $5.5 million that could have gone to fixing the electrical grid or getting rid of some of the giant piles of open sewage that they had in Baghdad, so that he could give them a PowerPoint presentation that's just a bunch of pictures of camels and it says innovation. That's the best case scenario of what he did.
I mean, the big secret of McKinsey, beyond just complete moral bankruptcy and outright evil, is that the actual work they do that's beyond just make a really addictive drug that feels better than anything for really cheap is just bullshit. It's shit like that. It's just it's just going into places and being you need to optimize your externalities. It'll be $17 million. I mean, there's a lot of money to be made just sort of overcharging in war zones. It's one of America's biggest growth industries. So I'm sure there was a bit of that.
So he goes here. When another reporter asked about McKinsey later that day, Buttigieg downplayed its relevance to his political and professional life. The majority of my career has been in public service, he said. It's not something that I think is essential in my story, but also there's a reason why I write about it quite a bit in my book, and there's a reason why I discuss it whenever it comes up, because I learned a lot there and it shaped my fluency in business issues. Buttigieg devoted most of a 10-page chapter in Shortest Way Home to his work at McKinsey. Back to the U.S. in 2007, he wrote, I landed a job in Chicago at McKinsey & Company, and my classroom was everywhere. A conference room, a serene corporate office, the break room of a retail store, a safe house in Iraq, or an airplane seat.
What's up, man?
Yeah, that's a hell of a gear shift there.
Yeah. My classroom was everywhere. In the university, in the boardroom, on the bus, at a black site in Syria. What? Hello?
Looking through a sniper scope.
Yeah. Well, he never did any of that.
No.
The oil derrick prison from Face Off.
He said a safe house in Iraq or an airplane seat, any place that could accommodate me and my laptop.
I ain't me without my laptop.
Yeah, you know me. I gotta watch my shows. All right, dude.
The book briefly referenced, and Buttigieg occasionally mentions, work on efforts to promote energy efficiency and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. He went into substantive detail only on one other project, grocery pricing for an unidentified client in Canada. But he offered nothing further on the safe house in Iraq, easily the most tantalizing tidbit in the chapter. And he did not elaborate beyond identifying himself as a civilian advisor on the war zone economic development he trumpeted while running for state treasurer and mayor.
What I like, if he really is a CIA agent running for president, it would be fun. That makes me think he is, because he just keeps accidentally revealing it. Like, that's very, very CIA to just be up there and be like, when I'm talking to my great husband, Chasten, when I'm talking to my handlers, when I'm talking to my supporters.
He's like, let's just say I did great work for a company. You might say the company. So Buttigieg wrote reverentially of the firm, referring to McKinsey.
I guess.
What's up?
But saw his future was in public service. No matter how much I liked my clients and my colleagues, he wrote, delivering for them could not furnish the deep level of purpose that I craved. McKinsey consultants are now delivering for him. Its employees have donated more to him than any other Democrat running for president.
Wow, they must have really liked him there. He must have been cool in the workplace. That's where he started doing the dance.
I've got okay, last bit of Pete Buttigieg thing. Incredibly, someone has found his husband, Chasten Buttigieg's Instagram page, who posted a loving selfie with the caption, "This guy," of Pete Buttigieg walking through the Berlin Holocaust Memorial.
Okay.
Just like San Antonio Spurs basketball player Danny Green of the famous post of all time, I had to do it one time, #Holocaust.
Well, the hashtag, that makes that one of the top 10 posts ever.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I got to say, to defend the Chasten and Pete limited liability partnership, I've been to that memorial, and
you can't help
unless someone explicitly told you it's a Holocaust memorial, you'd have no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a German's idea of like trying to be like emotionally profound. So it's just
Giant
like,
cubes.
oh, what if there was a lot of concrete in the center of the city? Like, they feel bad, but it's just like they have no ability to artistically express that. So you can't walk. It's not like being in fucking Dachau or something.
Yeah.
It's not like making an emotionally profound video in Auschwitz like Clay Higgins. Like cooking gumbo in the gas chambers.
Oh, man, you got it. You go down Auschwitz down there. You go down that Auschwitz down there. Oh, mon ami.
Right. It's not like bringing your friend. It's not like bringing your friend who's
You get that étouffée going.
It's not like bringing your friend who's a talking crocodile to the mass graves, like Clay Higgins did.
I tell you right now, they got some goulash in there. Oh, mon ami.
Alligator.
Mon Dieu.
But it is right. It's one of those things where it's like, well, imagine if Bernie did it. Like, imagine Imagine if Bernie took a picture of Jane and also a singing alligator who he was friends with. Talked about his gumbo recipe, which Pete also did. Pete was the cameraman. Pete was the cameraman for the Clay Higgins video. A lot of people don't know this.
Just like, Bernie and Jane at the Holocaust Memorial. The caption is like, "They want what we got."
My day one bitch.
No. Bernie taking a photo of the Berlin Holocaust Memorial. Caption: "If I'm paying, who's going?"
I just want to get a girl. We're gonna drink margaritas at the Holocaust Memorial. If she wakes up at 8 a.m. every day, I'm giving her a Louis V bag every week. I will take her to get her toes done. Well, imagine if Bernie Sanders just posted multiple videos where he's dancing around in ASOS shorts and you can see his dick print. And he claimed to be a surgeon.
I'm going to buy my girl a college.
No girlfriend at the moment. Just taking my mom on cute little dates to the Holocaust Memorial.
I swear to God, life is lit when you're the senator from Vermont and you're single.
Oh God. Well, I mean, so yeah, that's.
I get paid $50,000 a bill in the Senate. My money is good.
So yeah, there you go. Pete Buttigieg again, I cannot help but read weird polls stating that he's like leading in Iowa. Just I can't imagine who actually supports this guy, but now we know it's like probably the CIA.
Yes. And they could put a hell of a thumb on the
And,
scale.
like,
we saw Pete's supporters are diehard. Like they are.
Oh yeah, no.
They're fully. I
war
think
boys.
because what we alluded to, there's no more powerful feeling than wanting to go back to the past.
Yeah.
That's stronger than anything. No one else really has it.
Yeah,
Biden
he
a little.
could he could make 2009 real.
Yeah.
and that's a powerful incentive. Virgil said that that the Kamala people were sort of like the Germans at the end of World War II, where they still felt the sense of duty, but they were really willing to give up. And the Pete people are like the Japanese.
Yeah.
You're going to have to drop 2 nukes on and are still going to hole up in caves for 20 years after the war.
Go home, Yankee. Your wife is on a Bumble date with a consultant.
Oh, man.
So yeah, that's Buttigieg and Warren too.
Yeah.
So,
Once again, just one guy.
yep.
Such
that's
an
it.
easy choice.
I mean,
One guy,
There's
Michael
only
Bennett.
the one guy,
You know the deal. There's
Michael Bloomberg.
Come join. Walk on the golden path. There's only one golden path.
Yep. Deval Patrick.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. Can we talk about that real quick?
Yeah.
I mean, I was winding down for a second, but Deval Patrick hopping in the race.
Bloomberg.
Who the fuck is this for? I was like bleeding through my eyes trying to figure out what the real angle here is, and people were like speculating that it's just all about making sure there's a brokered convention.
No.
But then you look into the actual rules, it makes that less likely.
Nope. Absolutely.
And
It is-
all it is like how do they understand that this only will bleed support from everyone who's not Bernie Sanders?
It's time for some game theory. This
Okay,
is
all
real
right,
game
Matt.
theory.
Let's
This is not Adderall insanity. This is real game theory.
spit.
This is what John Nash won a Nobel Prize in economics for. Okay, the
Being a
idea
nonce.
is there is the DNC as an institution, the Democratic Party as an institution, and the people who are running for the presidency mostly are members of it. It is in their interest to see Bernie not get the nomination. So that is their collective goal. That's the best case for them. But the individual incentives of all the members of it running for president are different. They have the individual incentive to be president. And as long as they think they can be president, they're going to stay in the race. Even if the longer they stay in the race, the harder they make it to beat Bernie. And that's the same collective action problem that fucked over the Republicans last time with Trump. It would have helped. The thing to do early on would have been for one person to drop out, but they couldn't decide who the one was. So as long as everybody thought they could be the one, they were going to hang around. And that's just what's happening now. And now people are jumping in because they feel like they can do it.
They could still be the
and
one.
And it's because they have the individual incentive that goes against their collective incentive,
once again, Matt, I think you have pierced the veil.
Yes, indeed. And that is, ironically, the same collective action problem that makes climate change such a terrifying problem.
But like the hilarious thing to me about Deval Patrick is like, who the fuck? I mean, again, Felix, your point about like everyone just like, I will make 2009 real again. Like he's just saying, I'm the Obama candidate, but I worked at Bain Capital, which is how Obama beat Mitt Romney in 2012.
He's the synthesis of Obama and Romney. And everybody loved that election. That was fun.
Yeah.
There was never any real tension. It was never really that close. Romney was funny, but not scary. It was great. Everybody had a good time. Why wouldn't you want to go back to that moment by fusing that race into one man who can embody it forever and we could live with him?
Yeah,
Matt, it's 2012. It's still you're still the funniest coworker because you're sending like a sir memes on chain emails. You're playing Battlefield 3. You're considered good at it because everyone else who plays it is a 37-year-old IT guy with shit reflexes. You don't know how bad it will get.
Well, I mean, I say Bloomberg, Deval Patrick, come on down.
Bring it on. Bring it on. More of them.
And also,
Eric Holder, I've heard, might do it.
Also, hilariously, Bloomberg gave a speech this weekend where he disowned his support for stop and frisk during his 3 terms as mayor of New York City. It's so transparently cynical.
It's kind of poetic. This guy's got billions of dollars. He was mayor of New York for 3 terms, way more than he ever deserved. Disgusting, filthy pig man. And yet, in his last days on Earth, and he's his late 70s, he's just throwing away money and humiliating himself for this absurd dream of being president. So I do think that that's nice that he's getting owned a little bit.
Same thing for Tom Steyer and John Delaney.
Yeah,
like just
absolutely. John Delaney isn't that rich. John Delaney is fucking bankrupting himself off this shit.
Right. But like, if you look at how those two guys made their money, just killers.
Yeah.
Just soulless, fucking, just rip into the inefficiencies and the pain in people's lives. Just every insanity-inducing thing about the American healthcare system and a billion other things. Just laser focus on what makes people's lives horrible. Smelling blood in the water of capitalism. And they spend decades doing this. They come out, they have hoarded just piles of money, and they're like, I still wake up and I'm me. I guess I need to be president.
Yep.
And they don't even fucking sniff it. They don't even fucking.
They get to spend a year blowing through their money, fucking getting parvo by getting 500 handshakes in an hour, and just humiliating themselves, getting made fun of for being losers, and they're doing it to themselves. It's all self-inflicted because they're so deluded, and in this one moment they cannot be rational actors.
It is sort of poetic because it's like if you spend your entire life like a Bloomberg, like a Steyer, to a lesser extent like a Delaney, you've been a rational actor to a fault. You can see through everything that's going on. You can pierce through all the emotions, and you can exploit everyone and anybody, and you do. But, you can't really apply that to yourself.
Nope.
You don't know why you feel like shit.
Well,
but you do. You do feel like shit. You wouldn't do this if you didn't feel like shit.
Maybe if I was in the White House, I'd feel good about myself.
Well, I mean, both their insane vanity and ludicrous need to claim the mantle of like the electable Democrat, all to the benefit of one Bernard Sanders. So
yes.
I say, bring it on. And to everyone who's listening, again, you probably already feel this way, but let's say if you're on the fence, still time to support Bernie.
End of the week.
Make phone calls for him, donate money, volunteer. Let's do it.
Get your name written in the book of life, not the pay no mind list.
Not the book of death.
Yes.
Also known as McKinsey and Company's spreadsheet.
Yes.
All right. Till next time, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.